Welcome to the Industrial Talk Podcast with Scott McKenzie. Scott is a passionate industry professional dedicated to transferring cutting-edge, industry-focused innovations and trends while highlighting the men and women who keep the world moving. So put on your hard hat, grab your work boots, and let's go.
Hey there, welcome to the Industrial Talk Podcast. So glad that you are here. My name is Scott McKenzie, but you know that because you're listening to the Industrial Talk Podcast. And I've said this a gazillion times. This platform is 100% dedicated to you, the industrial professionals, the companies that get it done. You're bold, you're brave, you dare greatly, you innovate, you're changing the world, and we're here to celebrate you. So let's go. We've got a great interview, as we always do, because industry is just full of great people. Let's get going. All right. Yep, the elephant in the room is pandemic, virus, all of that stuff associated with it. However, we've got to think now, possibly yesterday, we got to think about how we're going to transition from here today to a world that's post-virus. What are the strategies that we can talk about today? What are the actions we could take today? How are we going to collaborate with thinkers that are innovative today? We have at our access, at our fingertips, everything that we need right here, right now, and there's no time to waste. We're depending on you. We're depending on your solutions. We're depending on your ability to be able to get back up and running, employ those people, get that supply chain running again, and start manufacturing to drive us to, well, I can't say new normal, but something different. But you know as well as I do, business is not the same. You can't continue to think that you're going to do business the same way, because there's going to be other companies out there that are going to be talking about how am I going to gain market share in this particular environment, and we want you to be a part of that. We want you to continue to think about innovative ways that you can leverage technology, interact with individuals that are here to help, right? So that's what we're all about. That's Operation Phoenix. We're going to continue to highlight great people. And speaking of great people, we're going to be interviewing a gentleman in this podcast right now, Gleb, G-L-E-B, Tsipursky. Now, put up T in front of that. So that's T-S-I-P-U-R-S-K-Y. He is the founder and CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts. And he is a published author, and he's got some mad street cred out there, no doubt about it. He is very, and I mean very active out on LinkedIn. And quite frankly, Dr. Gleb, if you go to his stat card out, you'll just say, wow, that's impressive. And when we first connected, that was probably a couple of months ago, he was able to pivot because we were going to talk about his book, Never Go With Your Gut, and so on. But we never thought about the pandemic by any means, and he just rolled with it. I just said, hey, we're going to have to talk about COVID-19, and what do we do as leaders, and how do we adjust, deal with the challenges. And Gleb, Dr. Gleb, he was masterful. And you know what? He's super passionate about you, your success, and I'm always into that. So anyway, go out. He's definitely got some great skills out there in his LinkedIn. And then reach out, and we're going to have on the end of it of how we're going to get a hold of Dr. Gleb, and how we're going to he's got a great download that you can receive in this time. This is timely. I'm just telling you. And he stepped up to the plate and started to share his insights and wisdom of what we need to, because we need to collaborate. We need to work together, because we, as a whole, don't have the answers to as one person. You can't be in a vacuum. So here's Dr. Gleb Tsipursky, Disaster Avoidance Expert. All right, Gleb, thank you very much for joining the Industrial Talk Podcast. So glad that you made time in your busy schedule, given the situation that exists out there today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Scott. Thanks so much for having me on the Industrial Talk podcast. Really appreciate it.
Definitely. The pleasure's all ours on this side, man. I think this is going to be an incredible conversation and one that is somewhat timely, to say the least. However, when we first started going down this road, you were busy and we just pushed it out. We didn't have a pandemic, so I am excited. And so we're doing a little, adjustment to a certain extent, but I think it's going to be quite relevant. For the listeners out there, can you just sort of give us a little background on who you are, where you come from, and all that good stuff in your background?
Sure. So I am a disaster avoidance expert, which is why Scott rightly says this is an unfortunately very busy time for me. So I do a lot of consulting, coaching, and training in decision making and risk management, because it's decisions that lead to disasters, whether active decisions that lead to disasters by a business leader, by anyone, by a nonprofit leader, by individual, or the lack of an important decision, lack of foreseeing a disaster. So that is the kind of problems that I take a look at and I help folks address. I've been doing disaster avoidance, decision making, and risk management for about 20 years as a consultant, coach, trainer.
Give me a break. You look like you're only 20.
You.
I mean, my goodness.
I have wonderful genes.
You do. Holy cow. It's like 20 years.
Thank you. Yes, yeah. I appreciate it. I'm 39. But yeah, so I've been doing that since I was 19, training folks in this type of stuff. And then I've also gone into academia, because the actual literature and decision making in the popular literature is very poor. Talks about going with your gut, following your intuition, and it's especially bad in times of pandemics, major disasters. We can talk about that, why that is. But anyway, I had to go into academia to study these topics. So I became a cognitive neuroscientist and a behavioral economist. I spent about 7 years as a professor in Ohio State University, so go Bucks. And
I'm sorry, we're Tiger fans down here. LSU Tiger, go LSU.
I'm sorry. Well, hopefully.
Here, little podcast trash talk for you listeners out there.
Well, hopefully, both LSU and Ohio State will play again someday once the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's like, I don't know.
In a few years, right?
Put it into a video game mode.
There you go. Esports.
Yeah, that's about right.
So anyway, so that's what I do. I help folks address this topic, and the reason I'm busy right now is that a lot of companies for whom I've worked on disaster preparedness plans actually are calling me right now to revise them because obviously this is a major disaster.
Isn't this just your continuity, your business continuity plan didn't include a global pandemic. It might have included something that was somewhat regional. Who might know? But a global? Oh my goodness! No. I just you didn't have it. And it was so fascinating too, Gleb, that one day we're fine and the next day was like a switch. And then for companies to be able to sort of, stop is painful.
It really is. Yeah. And unfortunately, this is one of the areas where we suffer from these very dangerous judgment errors called cognitive biases, this is what I study, and I help leaders, companies avoid these topics. And the biggest one here, so cognitive biases, where do they come from? Well, they come from the fact that our gut reactions, our intuitions, are not wired for the modern environment. They're wired for the savannah environment. That's what we're evolved for.
Hold on. You just said something real quick. We're not wired for what?
We're not wired for the modern business environment. That's not what our brains are wired for. Our brains are wired for the ancient savannah environment when we're hunters and gatherers.
Wow.
Living in small tribes.
I like that. Okay.
That's good. Yep. And so our main response to threats is called the fight or flight response. You might have heard of it. It's when we had to jump 100 shadows in order to get away from that one saber-toothed tiger. It's also called the saber-toothed tiger response. Well, a lot of companies and ordinary people are reacting to the pandemic as though it's a saber-toothed tiger. They are in panic mode. So some people are completely ignoring the information. That's the flight response. They're saying, not going to happen to me. This is fine. I'm going to go and do my, hang out, have parties. Go to whatever. There are a number of companies which big companies like Hobby Lobby, which governments had to force closed. I was very surprised. But yes, there are a number of companies like that, and Hobby Lobby is just the big one that is national, and there are a number of other ones.
Right.
Of course,
didn't know that.
Claiming that they're an essential business. No, they're not. Hobby Lobby is not an essential business.
Maybe, but not to me. No, you're right.
Exactly. So that's one. And of course, a lot of companies are reacting with a fight response, with the emergency mode, all in, let's take care of this problem, fix it right now, this going to their business continuity plans. And their business continuity plans, which is the main fight response, what are they made for? I mean, you're absolutely correct, Scott. They're made for a very short-term problem. Yes. So, for example, they're made for Houston to be flooded. That's the kind of thing.
That's a good example.
Yep. So it's like a 1 week or 2 week situation where everyone goes to work from home and then, they come back. This is not that. This is a different situation. This is a situation where Houston is flooded and stays flooded.
Yeah.
That is where...
Right, and it's a global flood. So
it's a global flood, exactly. So instead of going to walk, in Houston, you need to figure out how to get a boat and do that. This is a completely different situation, and they are trying to function with their old plans in this new situation. That's a bad idea.
But how do you? I mean, you know exactly the reality is like yesterday everything was fine. Today it's all bad, and it's global, and it's. You're absolutely right. It's fight or flight. But right off the bat, it's like, I can't believe it. I don't even know what to do. Mm-hmm. And what is a typical or a response that would have been sort of in line with what you're talking about? Not your hunter and gatherers, but a little bit more modern, right? What would you do?
So the civilized response to it is first to realize that we have bad responses and notice that we have bad responses. The first thing to do. Awareness is always the first step. So you need to know the specific cognitive bias here is called the normalcy bias. Now, our intuition, our feeling is that the future will be like the past. That's how we feel. That's the intuitive thing. So we are not used to the future being immediately and suddenly changed. And it is. This COVID-19 will be around for the next several years. And this, you might think that that's an exaggeration, but all scientific experts, and you got to look at the science here, they say we'll have waves of clamping down restrictions and then loosening of restrictions. There will be an outbreak and then clamping down of restrictions again.
Listeners are listening to you and now they're just not happy. Just FYI.
Sorry. I'm a disaster avoidance expert. I don't talk about happy things.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
I'm not the rainbow and unicorn expert,
Well, I was just, my head started going down. It's like, I don't want to hear this now. No, it's good. No, so you got to understand the situation.
Yep. Yeah. And the vaccine, we will not have a vaccine available, developed for the next 18 months at least, and then it'll take another year to produce it, ship it, and vaccinate people. That's the most optimistic scenario. More pessimistic scenarios, it may take 5 to 7 years, and even longer. So, for the most optimistic scenario, 2 to 3 years. More pessimistic scenarios, 5 to 7 years. And you should not prepare for the more optimistic scenario. So,
wow.
Right now,
okay, pull me off the cliff, please.
This is just a situation. Well, the smart companies, what they're doing right now, and what I'm helping my clients do, is actually not jumping and going into emergency mode. Yeah. What they're doing is they're realizing this is a new normal. That means that the switch that we made, that people going home, working from home, whatever, social distancing, all that stuff, is going to be a 5 to 7 year switch at the most optimal. Kind of, a most optimal 2 to 3 year switch, more realistically 5 to 7 year switch. That means that you can't stick with your old plans. You need to accept that this is the new normal, and you need to change your business model. This is the most fundamental thing you need to do right now. You need to think about and start working on fundamentally, drastically changing your business model. You'll have a virtual team. You need to change your internal business model. You need to change how your team collaborates together, how they both build and cultivate trust with each other, how they solve problems, how they're held accountable. So those 4 things you need to be focusing on right now and thinking about that in the long term. And you need to...
I don't mean to interrupt. You're absolutely correct. It's my mantra has been, hey, you got an opportunity right now, and that opportunity says, hey, there's going to be you got to do something today. You got to look at your business processes. You got to look at your business model. You got to figure out how to create some resiliency in it, because this one kicked everybody in the britches. And you got to figure out how to have some sort of sustainable business model in this environment, because this is worst case, right?
Yes. This is not, and you have to think about not simply sustainable, not simply surviving, but thriving, because you
Yes.
can't survive for the next 2 to 3 years. You can survive for a month, you can survive for 2 months. Government aid will carry you over for the next 3 to 4 months, maybe, but it will not carry you for the 2 to 3 years. The government can't afford that. This is not something that you can rely on the government for. You need to rely on yourself, and more realistically, 5 to 7 years. That means you need to be switching right now your team to a virtual team, and you need to change things, like I said, how you collaborate together fundamentally. How do you build and cultivate trust? Right now, people cultivate trust, in the office just by talking to each other. That needs to be cultivated. You need to figure out how to hold people accountable. You need to figure out how to notice and resolve problems. You need to figure out, like I said, how to collaborate together effectively and give professional development. So right now, a lot of your folks don't know how to do things well. You need to give them professional development in all of these things. It might feel uncomfortable to be spending money in this, but considering that this is an investment into a 2 to 3 year timeline, more realistically 5 to 7 year timeline, this is a very smart investment. That's where the smart money is going. That's where you need to be doing, because you will remove so much friction that you don't realize you're suffering right now. A number of people, they're just functioning in emergency mode. They went home, they're gonna be okay for the first couple of weeks, for the first month, but then they'll lose motivation. Without their coworkers around, which is where they're getting motivation, they will lose that sense of connection. They will lose that sense of leadership, accountability. This is what you need to guard against. This is your internal business model. Now, you need to also change your external business model. It depends, of course, on your specific services, but I'm right now working, for example, with a professional service firm of lawyers who are right now working on changing their business model. Some of the things that they're doing is, of course, doing DocuSign, all of that electronic stuff.
Absolutely.
But the biggest problem they have, and the biggest problem I can guarantee to you, whether industrial companies, legal lawyer companies also will have, is cultivating trust with their customers, with their clients. That is the biggest problem, because you cultivate trust by meeting face to face, those conversations, handshake, tapping somebody on the shoulder. You can't do that right now. So you need to figure out how you'll cultivate trust with your most valuable assets, your customers, your clients.
See, this is interesting, because pre-virus, whatever, we would sort of skirt around all these issues. We would sort of talk a little bit about, maybe talk about, hey, my supply chain is somewhat weak here, and this, that, and everything. But this whole event has brought it to the forefront, and people are forced to think exactly the way you're talking. And like, for example, that trust, now it's a huge deal. It's always before it's like, I sort of trust them, but now it's like, I've got to trust them that they're going to sort of row in the same direction or whatever. You're absolutely spot on that one. Big time.
I mean, I wish people were thinking that they needed to trust them. They're not thinking about that. They're thinking about the emergency situation. They're thinking they're in emergency mode and it will pass in a month. And they will go back to doing their old mode of things. This is what I'm overwhelmingly seeing. It's coming from leaders like Elon Musk, who is saying that, hey, we'll have no new cases by the end of April. And other business leaders, like I said, Hobby Lobby, not refusing to close stores. Plenty of business leaders are making terrible decisions right now, right this minute, right this moment. They are making really bad decisions. And this is a problematic situation. Of course, political leaders at all levels are making some bad decisions and bad predictions about what's going to happen. This will be long lasting. And what you need to be doing is focusing on your long-term business model and your long-term strategic plans. Your strategic plans have just gone out the window, my friends.
Let me ask you this, and this is, you're absolutely spot on. For me personally, I stay away from news, social media, and all I focus in on exactly what you're talking about. What are strategies? What are solutions that we can begin to, and it's going to take time. You can have this conversation, but what are those strategies? Get that innovation out there. Get that conversation moving, because you're absolutely right. If you're mired in looking at the news and you're sitting there going, oh my gosh, it's political. I don't understand this. You're just going to sit there and just crumble. I mean, you are, if you're just like, if you're like, oh, I don't know what to do. Just for me personally, focus in on what you're talking about.
Yes, exactly.
Now.
And the news will not necessarily help you. There was a
No.
Goldman, I'll give an example, even business news. So Goldman Sachs had a forecast on February 24th that changed its economic forecast because of the coronavirus for US GDP growth in the second quarter from 2.3 to 1.2. Then on March 15th, it had a forecast that changed that to -5. Then on March 20th, it had a forecast that changed it to -24% GDP.
Oh,
Goldman
wow.
Sachs has no idea what they're talking
No,
about.
they
If
don't.
Goldman Sachs doesn't have any idea of what they're talking about with their analysis and so many billions of dollars spent on their analysts, you should not be trusting the news to give you reliable information right now. You need to
Absolutely
focus
correct.
on the long term, on your company, and what you can do in changing your business model. And when you think about a strategic plan, what you want to do is do three things. Work out a strategic plan for the optimistic scenario, that's the 2 to 3 year plan. For a moderate scenario, that's the 5 to 7 year plan. And for a pessimistic scenario, that's a 10 to 10 year plan for when vaccine is available and COVID-19 will be over. So work out those three plans, and you will be much more prepared for the future than your competitors. And then you'll want to also think about how you can effectively seize market share from your competitors who will be hobbled because they have not changed their business model and have not changed their plan.
Don't even go there. I've already had that conversation a number of times. And what you're talking about, there's a sense of, I'm not saying that, the pain and the frustration or the agony, whatever, all of this, it's real out there. That's one. But two, if you do somewhat develop that discipline to begin focusing on your business and incrementally just start asking those questions, and like you said, those three options, do it no matter how painful it is. There's sort of, I don't know, there's something that you feel like you're moving forward. You're not a victim as opposed to what you're being proactive. I like that a lot.
Yes. So this is what you need to be doing. And I'm very serious about market share. You want to be thinking about that. This is the opportunity aspect of a crisis. And this is where you can build up your company and make this into an opportunity, not simply a threat, not simply, the sky is falling, but think about how you will change your team to a virtual team. Think about how you will change your business, service delivery model, industry, product delivery model to a virtual model. Think about how you'll change your long-term plans. Think about, of course, how you'll change your supply chains to be less vulnerable to more and more outbreaks of COVID-19, which will inevitably happen. And then you'll be in a much better position than many of your competitors who are not doing these smart things, who are not being smart. Again, three versions of a strategic plan. Optimistic, moderate, pessimistic. And optimistic is 2 to 3 years. Doesn't sound optimistic, but that is the most optimistic scenario we have. So you want to do that. You want to be prepared. You want to have as part of your plan how you will seize market share from your competitors. And that gives you hope. It's incredibly important to have hope. It's incredibly important to look at the future as a hopeful place. And that is definitely a place of hope where you can really succeed by taking the smart steps right now and make lemonade when life gives you lemons.
Yeah, I did a podcast on that too. It's the same thing. It's just like, why not? I mean, we could sit there. I always tell people, I said, we got three options. Either you listen to the news and the social and then get all tied up in knots and then you're crippled by that. Two, or you just sit and wait for somebody to tell you what to do and you're just sort of reactionary. Or three, move forward, make your mistakes, have this conversation, leverage the technology that exists today, and it's not that difficult, guys. Yeah. It's not that difficult, and see what you can do. Because for me and for others, we're depending on people to be innovative now. We are depending from the economy, from everybody. We're depending on them. And you can't just sort of sit back and wait. And that's where market share comes in. Be that leader.
Yes.
There it is, man.
Exactly.
That's my football analogy, rah-rah speech in the locker room.
Yeah, so these are the speeches that I'm giving my clients, and a lot of them are shell-shocked, essentially.
Yes.
And this is what you need to get out of. Because if you stay shell-shocked, a lot of your competitors are staying shell-shocked. And you need to think ahead of your competitors before they think ahead of you.
That's a really very cool statement, just because you're absolutely right. Somebody's going to figure this out. Some like you, very creative, very innovative, very driven. Somebody's going to figure it out. and they're going to thrive in a, I can't even say based off of your analogy, post-virus. It's not. It sounds like it's all taken care of, and we're going to go. Not. It's not. It's going to continue to sort of be that open wound that flares up here and there, and you're going to have to deal with it. Let me see. Yeah, I'm so keen on this conversation. This is really timely, my friend. I really do. Now,
and unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately. Okay, so let's get to the nuts and bolts here. One, are you active out on LinkedIn?
I'm quite active on LinkedIn. So Dr. Gleb Tsipursky, Gleb Tsipursky.
Yep.
And if you have any questions about anything you've heard on this podcast, please connect with me there. I'll be happy to answer questions.
Okay, so listeners out there, you know that all of this information will be available at industrialtalk.com. I will have all his contact information, spelling, everything. Quite frankly, Gleb Tsipursky. Tsipursky. Got it. See, I did it again. I had to look at it. But there's not very many Gleb Tsipurskys out there on LinkedIn, so you don't even have to put in your company's name, man. It's like, yeah, he's right there. There it is. Easy peasy. And so you listeners out there, it will be out there. I'm going to push it. It's all a part of Operation Phoenix. Some hope, some strategies, all of that stuff that we're trying to put into action for you, the industrial company, the industrial professionals. Gleb, we could talk on for hours, but I'm not sure if my heart could deal with the realities of what's taking place.
Yes.
And then, my pool is the cleanest it's ever been because I've already cleaned it, and then my dog is in the best shape ever.
I can't tell you how far ahead my garden is of, when it's ever been.
It's that same year. I was trimming hedges.
Oh, yeah.
All right. I guess I got to take care. You've been an absolute wonderful guest, my friend. Thank you, Gleb. Thank you for being on the Industrial Talk podcast. I know our listeners truly appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Scott. I really appreciate you having me on.
You listeners, hang tight. We're going to wrap it up on the other side, so stay tuned.
You're listening to the Industrial Talk Podcast Network.
Hey, once again, thank you very much for joining the Industrial Talk podcast. Gleb Tsipursky. Dr. Gleb, that's Gleb Tsipursky. And he's got the street cred, Disaster Avoidance Experts with an S, LLC. He's CEO and all-around incredible big thinker. Again, who would ever thought that your continuity, your business continuity plan didn't include a pandemic? Well, it didn't. And how about that for a timely conversation? Reach out to him. He'd be more than happy. And you know what else he provided? I'm looking at, he sent me on landing page. Okay, so just note to self, but it'll be out there on Industrial Talk on his podcast landing page. It's Disaster Avoidance Experts with an S.com/Never Gut. It's a landing page of his book, Never Go With Your Gut. Timely. Bottom line, timely stuff. So anyway, thank you again. Find out more about Dr. Gleb. And remember, Operation Phoenix, we're all about rising out of the ashes. We're going to continue to highlight great industrial professionals like Dr. Gleb. And we're going to get through this together. We're going to collaborate. We're going to succeed. Be bold. Be brave. Dare greatly. Change the world. Thank you very much. Take care.